Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm having a ton of fun in the Open Grey League with an unexpected nuke move. For the team, I'm running a very strong staple meta core of Mantine plus Shadow Whiscash. But where the fun happens is on the safe switch, I'm running normal CASTFORM, but this is not your normal CASTFORM. This is running Hurricane, the goal of which being to bait out fighting types like Annihilate, and then one-shot them with Hurricane damage. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and let's have some fun in the Grey League with normal CASTFORM. Hopping into the first match, picking up an amazing lead Mantine versus Annihilate. Opponent safe switches into Lickitung, and this is a bit of a problem Pokemon for this team. Technically, Lickitung has a positive matchup against every member of this team, so I'm going to stay in with the Mantine because I do need to get some chip damage before I eventually send in the CASTFORM. The goal, of course, being is once I get some damage onto the Lickitung, the opponent is going to send in the Annihilate to try for a farm down, and they're really not going to value health too much on the Annihilate, considering that the Annihilate is going to be stuck going up against a Mantine. They're going to fire off the Body Slam. I go for the Weather Ball. It's charge attack priority, and if this doesn't KO, they're going to get the move, and the Lickitung barely hangs on with a fraction of HP. That's the unfortunate thing about Hex, is Hex is not going to be able to output a lot of damage, so it takes 2 more Hexes to get rid of the Lickitung. Opponent sends in the Annihilate, normal CASTFORM, makes it to the Hurricane. Do they respect the damage? They do not! Down goes Annihilate. In the back is Skarmory, and this game is just instantly over. I can send in the Whiscash, go for the Scald, and as long as I just never shield the Whiscash, my opponent does not have a path to victory. They realize this, and they concede the match. Decent lead in the next match, Mantine versus Empoleon. A lot of the time when I do see Empoleon leads, they do tend to have Annihilate in the back, so instead of staying in here and playing this out, I'm actually going to look to safe switch into the CASTFORM. Maybe not the most amazing play, but if there's an Annihilate back there, I need to bait it out. So I send in the CASTFORM, opponent will fire off the Hydro Cannon, that does quite a lot of damage, and they send in Cresselia, and that is really not ideal. I mean, the good news is I baited out the Cresselia, because Cresselia would absolutely crush the Whiscash in the back, but not being able to bait out an Annihilate and then nuke it with Hurricane means that the energy that I got on the CASTFORM doesn't really do a whole lot to the Cresselia. Cresselia, I think they're in a range where Water Pulse plus Aerial Ace will KO, so I go for the Water Pulse. That should be Aerial Ace range, so now I can just fire off these charge attacks back to back. Opponent has energy on the Cresselia, but they're not going to get to use it. And when they send in Empoleon, I'm just sending in the Shadow Whiscash. In comes Shadow Whiscash in the back. It's Trevenant, and this is going to be very, very tough to win this game. I'm going to need to make a perfect catch if I want a chance to win. I go for the Scald, and unfortunately, I don't get the debuff. Granted, a debuff is not going to make the difference between a move KOing or not, because Seed Bomb is double super effective, but reducing the Shadow Claw damage would be nice. I'm going to go for the Scald. Opponent is going to let that through. Again, we do not get the debuff. I'm going to commit the shield. If I can get a catch, then there's a chance to win this game. Farming up with the Whiscash, but my timer was just not up. Trevenant makes the Seed Bomb, and unfortunately, that's just going to be a loss for me. I lose way too much energy, and I resign the match. Much better lead in the next match, Mantine versus Hakamo-o. Bonus save switches into Shadow for Alligator, and I throw my Aerial Ace instantly. This is very important. Since Switch takes a turn, they're 1 turn behind. So normally, it would be a charge attack priority tie, Aerial Ace to Hydro Cannon, but by throwing first in that situation, my opponent doesn't get a full sneak. So I'm always going to be 2 turns ahead in this matchup. So I can fire off the Aerial Ace. The move that I shielded was a Crunch, which also means that I'm going to be even further ahead on energy, because Crunch, of course, is going to be 6 Shadow Claws instead of the Hydro Cannon being 5. So I'm going to farm up, wait the turn to make sure they don't catch. Aerial Ace will get them to 1 HP, and the Wing Attack picks up the KO. In the back, it's Lantern. I'm going to pivot into the CASTFORM. Opponent sends in Hakamo-o. Hakamo-o can go for the Brick Break, but it's not going to be enough to KO. And with no shields remaining, this Hakamo-o is about to have a truly terrible day. Hurricane charged up by the CASTFORM. 1-hit KO against the Hakamo-o. Lantern actually decides to throw energy, worried about a potential energy ball, because CASTFORM can learn energy ball, and that's typically what people would expect. And now I can send in the Shadow Whiscash. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. Mantine versus Powder Snow Alolan Ninetales, and this is a pretty nice matchup for the Mantine. Opponent does not build up to a Dazzling Gleam, so I don't have to respect it. It's just going to be the Weather Ball, and now I can go for the Water Pulse. Water Pulse is the best damage per energy move that Mantine can learn, so Water Pulse is going to connect for some pretty nice damage. They can go for another Weather Ball, but it's not going to be enough to knock out. Weather Ball is going to connect. Mantine able to shake off that damage and go for an Aerial Ace. I'm going to go for an Undercharge and a Farm Down. They actually end up committing a shield. I'm farming up a ton of energy with the Mantine. They're going to send in Unova Stunfisk trying to catch the Aerial Ace, but I hold on to the energy, bank a Water Pulse for later in the match, and now I can send in the Shadow Whiscash. I don't think that landing a Scald allows me to farm down. Unova Stunfisk does have some pretty good bulk to it, so I'm going to go for double Mud Bomb, because I know this route is going to be safer in that I'm not going to be wasting any energy. So they will go for the Mud Bomb. I can look to overfarm slightly. I could have potentially overfarmed more, but having some residual energy will be helpful here, as Mud Bomb will pick up the KO. It all comes down to what do they have in the back. In the back, they have a Azumarill, so they're running ABA Fairy. Granted, poison types are pretty bad in the current meta, but if they saw something like a poison type, they would not have a particularly good day. Shadow Whiscash barely able to survive the bubble damage and make one final Mud Bomb, and from here I can just aggressively pivot into CASTFORM to deny them any extra energy, and this is just a completely unlosable game. I just shield the moves from the Azumarill. Ninetales has enough for a Dazzling Gleam, but even if a Gleam lands, that doesn't let them win the game, so I can just let it go. It ends up being double Weather Ball, but that's very fine. Again, I can just save the shields for the moves from Azu, because Azu is pretty slow to get the charge moves. In comes the Azu. Opponent realizes I have energy everywhere. They do not have a win con, and they resign the match. Great lead in the next match, Mantine versus Shadow Gligar, and the Gligar is not switching out. So it means there's something in the back that is really weak to Mantine that they're forced to stay in this bad matchup. They Aerial Ace, I'm going to build up past the Water Pulse, and I'm going to bait. I'm thinking that it could be Annihilate, and if that's the case, I do want to try and bait it out and land a Hurricane, so I'm actually going to switch out of a good matchup into the CASTFORM. Definitely not an advisable play, but I really want to try and bait out Annihilate. I shield, I end up shielding a bait, in comes a Skarmory. Skarmory also doesn't have an amazing time versus Mantine, but this is not what I was trying to bait out. That is so unfortunate. The good news is Hex to Weather Ball, you do get these moves pretty quickly, so I will be able to spam out these Weather Balls, but the unfortunate thing is they just don't do a lot of damage. This is a non-same type attack bonus Weather Ball. I'm just going to throw it as soon as I get it, and the opponent plays to a CMP tie that they do not win. They overfarm too much. CASTFORM wins CMP, and they lose so much energy. In comes Gligar. Aggressive pivot back into the Mantine, firing off the Water Pulse. Opponent calls the bait. In the back is Whiscash, and the opponent concedes the match. Decent lead in the next match, leading the Mantine versus Altaria. This is a situation where having Ice Beam would be nice, but of course my opponent doesn't know that I don't have Ice Beam, so I can farm up to a potential Ice Beam and grab a shield from my opponent. It's very important in this game that I keep the Shadow Whiscash away from the Altaria, as of course Shadow Whiscash can't really do anything in that matchup. They're going to go for the Moonblast. They try and catch onto their own Whiscash. That's a very surprising thing to save switch into a Mantine, but I guess they can absorb this energy. So I'm going to look to farm up, and I'm going to send in my own Shadow Whiscash, just because I want to keep it away from the Altaria if at all possible. They go for the Scald. They do get the debuff. I'm farming up, and I'm firing off a Scald of my own. This is debuff, so it will not be enough to knock out. Opponent is going to be able to withstand that damage. I do not get the Scald debuff. Throughout the day, I was definitely pretty unlucky in terms of Scald debuffs. I'm going to send in the CASTFORM. CASTFORM gets a very nice farm down. Are they going to be sending back in the Altaria, or do we get to see the third? They're thinking about it. They send in the Altaria, and honestly, that's great news for me. I will fire off the Weather Ball. I could fire off the next Weather Ball instantly here, but I decided to overfarm, and that proves to be a misplay. I had lost count of Altaria's energy. I'm forced to shield the Sky Attack. I'm looking to farm up, and in the back, oh no, I needed to keep my Whiscash. It is going to be Lantern in the back. And if I had Energy Ball, I'd be in a good spot, but I'm not running Energy Ball. I'm running Hurricane for Annihilate, but there's not an Annihilate in the back. Instead, it's a Lantern, and these Rock Weather Balls are doing nothing to the Whiscash. Whiscash can just go straight Surf and win this game. I will go for the Weather Ball. If I can land a second Weather Ball, then maybe I can switch into a combo play with a Water Pulse, but unfortunately, they're going to get to the move. And this is too healthy of a Lantern for Mantine to ever deal with, so I am going to resign the match. Moving into the next match, amazing lead. Mantine versus Annihilate. Opponent save switches into Galarian Stunfisk. And that's a Pokemon I haven't seen in ages. Oh my goodness. Galarian Stunfisk, the combination of the Earthquake nerf, as we do not get the Scald debuff once again, and Gligar becoming King of the Flyers really hurt Stunfisk's stocks. In this instance, honestly, I was a little worried that the Rock Slide might get me too low, so I decided to just fire off the Mud Bomb. That way I can play it safe, and when the Annihilate comes back in, I can't make the Scald, but I can still make a Mud Bomb, and a Mud Bomb is going to do quite a lot of damage. So the Mud Bomb is going to connect. I send in the Mantine. Mantine is going to fire off the Shadow Ball on charge attack priority. I'm very okay with no shielding here, because I know that I can survive this, and then Aerial Ace will knock out unless they're willing to give up the first shield of the match to protect the Annihilate, and they are. It's a Lantern in the back, and I'm forced to send in the cast form. Had the opponent not committed the shield on the Annihilate, again, I would have been in trouble. Like, their team worked as intended. They were able to bait out the cash, and with that gone, the Lantern's looking very scary, but they end up using a shield on the Annihilate, and that completely lets me back in this game. As CASTFORM, for the second game in a row, really wishing that it had Energy Ball as it fires off these Weather Ball rocks. I commit the shield upon a full sense of Thunderbolt, and that's an incredibly important shield. They could have probably gone straight Surf there. Surf doesn't quite KO, but Surf plus some Sparks will, and now they have to give up the shield, or they're just going to be losing the Lantern. They're trying to win the game with Annihilate. Aggressive switch back into the Mantine. Mantine is going to be able to make it to the Aerial Ace. Aerial Ace is going to be grabbing the final shield from the opponent, and they're just too low to win this game. Night Slash, even if it does knock out here, I can just Hex down, and it barely does not. The Mantine hangs on, and this time we're able to survive the backline Lantern. Decent lead in the next match, Mantine versus Shadow Alolan Sandslash. Another matchup where, thanks to Water Pulse, Mantine can actually win the zeros. I do want to check and see if there's a potential counter user in the back. Opponent tries to go for a Water Pulse catch, but I'm patient, hold on to my energy, and now I get to send in CASTFORM. Very nice charge attack timing by the opponent, as they will fire off their charge move. It is just going to be the Aerial Ace, though, and they're going to fire off their next Aerial Ace. So it looks like they are not going to go for the harder hitting Ice Beam or the Water Pulse instead, and now I can begin to start spamming out these Weather Balls. Weather Ball Rock is going to output some pretty decent damage onto the Mantine. Of course, not getting the same type of attack bonus means it's not going to do a ton, but it looks like Weather Ball Rock won't quite two-shot, but will come decently close. I could shield here, but I really don't want to get farmed down, so I just decided to let this through. I have a ton of energy on the Mantine, but the unfortunate thing is I'm actually going to have to use this energy to get rid of them, because that doesn't put it into farm down range, so I'm just going to go for the Aerial Ace right before they're able to make it to their next move. So Aerial Ace is going to be able to pick up the KO. They send in the Sandslash. I'm going to send in Whiscash, and they're firing off energy, and I'm up a shield, so I'm more than happy to commit a shield. I'm going to look to overfarm, go for the Mud Bomb, and I should have waited the turn. They catch onto Gligar. That's really tough. But if I get a Scald debuff, I'm still very much in this game. So I will go for the Scald. I win charge attack priority. That is an IV-dependent CMP tie right there. And the Scald doesn't get the debuff. I swear my Whiscash is just broken. My Whiscash is refusing to get the debuffs. And not getting the debuffs actually means that now this puts me in a range where I can't overfarm enough to win this game. Because the Aerial Ace just puts me too low. I can send in the Mantine here and go for the Water Pulse. But the unfortunate thing is I'm just going to get farmed down by the Alolan Sandslash. And A-Slash wins charge attack priority over the Whiscash. So, even though I make the Aerial Ace, it's not going to be enough to KO. They're going to exit with a move, and the move that I saved, unfortunately, is not going to be of use to me. If I did get the Scald debuff, then I would have been in a much better spot, but realistically, had I not allowed them to catch, I would have been in a position where I didn't need a 50-50 call to go my way. Moving to the final match. Tough Pokemon for the entire team to see, but we've done pretty well against Lickitung so far. So I'm going to stay in here, go for the Water Pulse. In these neutral situations, Water Pulse does have better damage per energy than Aerial Ace, so landing that Water Pulse is quite significant. Opponent will go for a Power Whip, which is harder hitting than Body Slam. I'm going to send in, oh no, I send in the CASTFORM. They send in Annihilate. Come on, we're charging up the Hurricane. They respect it. No, I'm not going to make it to the Hurricane. My only hope is that they just don't know CASTFORM counts, because realistically, who knows CASTFORM counts? And they don't. They end up committing the shield. I send in the Mantine. Opponent actually clicks the counter. They didn't click the move. I'm quite surprised there. I was just going to call that it was a Night Slash because I'm not in Night Slash range either way. I end up no shielding. It's an Ice Punch. Ice Punch barely does not KO. We would have had a simultaneous KO if we just kept hitting our fast moves, so they're forced to go for the Ice Punch. I can farm down with the Shadow Whiscash, and in the back, it's Wigglytuff, and this is a very straightforward game where I can just win it straight Mud Bomb. So I can fire off the Mud Bomb because I will need 2 moves to KO the Whiscash. Sorry, 2 moves from the Whiscash to KO the Wigglytuff. In comes the Lickitung. Lickitung firing off energy, but with 2 shields to hide behind. This is a very safe game for the Whiscash. I can just build up to double Scald. And I only need the Mud Bomb to KO the Wigglytuff. But if I have the Scald, I may as well throw it. So they can send back in the Wigglytuff. I can go for the Scald. And unfortunately in this game, the Annihilate actually respected the Hurricane, which is tragic, but we got 2 shields, and that set up Shadow Cash to sweep in the end. All in all, I did have fun getting to run this team. The first set was a little bit of tough, ended up going 2-3, but closed it out with a 5-0 set, so overall did go positive with the team. The core of Mantine and Shadow Whiscash is an extremely strong one. If you are looking to climb Elo, there are stronger options other than the normal cast form. That was just kind of some spice that I wanted to run because it's like, oh yeah, this thing does actually learn Hurricane, doesn't it? And most of the fighting types were unaware. That final player did actually respect it, and I was very, very sad. But I was able to get to nuke some fighting types, which was very enjoyable overall. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys always very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.